Hey guys, in today's video you will learn an impressive story, the account of Darian Crowe, a skeptical scientist who literally died for 12 minutes during an expedition in Antarctica and returned with an urgent warning about a secret buried under the ice that could change the destiny of humanity. What he saw on the other side defies all logic and reveals a truth so shocking you won't be able to take your eyes off the screen. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Now, get ready to embark on this intense and totally surprising journey. My name is Darian Crowe. If you had met me a few years ago, you would have called me a convinced skeptic, one of those who laugh at anything that doesn't fit into formulas, data, or equations. Nothing but science served as my guide, and honestly, I was proud of that. The world, after all, seemed to work well enough with logic, gravity, and probabilities. God? Spirit? Life after death? All of this I relegated to fantasy created out of fear and ignorance. My specialty was geophysics, with a focus on planetary magnetic resonance. Ice, pressure, fields, natural pulses. That was my territory. When I received the invitation to join an expedition to Antarctica, I confess that I hesitated. I had turned down projects like this before as they were dangerous, isolated, and logistically complicated. But something about this proposal caught my attention. Maybe it was the emptiness inside me, the same one that had set in since my wife, Rachel, died of a sudden aneurysm 2 years earlier. The project was led by a private coalition in partnership with unidentified sectors of the American government. The mission? Investigate anomalous electromagnetic signals detected by military satellites coming from the subsoil of Antarctica. They occurred at regular intervals, as if they were controlled pulses. Something down there was emitting signals, and no one knew exactly what. "You're going to like this, Darian," said Dr. Petrus, a colleague at the University of Washington who was coordinating. "It's not just a magnetic field. The patterns, they repeat a frequency, almost like language." "Natural noise," I replied. "Cosmic resonance or interference. Nothing that a good spectral analysis can't solve." Inside, however, something bothered me. A part of me, silent and forgotten, whispered that this calling was more than scientific. And for the first time, in years I listened. I left Anchorage 3 weeks later. When I arrived at the advance camp, the air felt different. It wasn't just the cold. It was as if the ice was watching me. During the first few days at the forward base, the silence on the ice was almost palpable, until he started talking. I was sitting in front of the monitor, examining spectral readings, when a low, steady noise emerged from the speakers. A whisper so faint that I thought it was electronic interference. I adjusted the gain, but the sound persisted, like distant voices sharing indecipherable secrets. "Do you hear that?" asked Dr. Elena Petrus, leaning over my shoulder. His eyes sparkled with curiosity, but there was something like a tremor of apprehension in his voice. I shook my head, unable to translate words into something coherent. That night, the wind howled beyond the metal walls of the housing module. I woke up sweaty, my heart racing, with a murmur resounding inside my head. "Come down. Come on." I tried to ignore it, rationalize it as a hallucination caused by stress and sleep deprivation. But the discomfort grew when others began to comment on similar dreams, fragments of inaudible sentences, fleeting images of light emanating from the ice. 3 days later, during a routine survey, the ground shook beneath our feet. The instruments recorded a sudden spike in electromagnetic energy, so intense that it turned off all electronic equipment within a 50-meter radius. The team ran to the shelter. I remained motionless, watching the crevasse slowly open in the ice, revealing a deep, dark cavity. "That doesn't make sense," I muttered, feeling the cold air come out like a sigh from the abyss. Elena approached, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "It's as if the ice itself is alive, waiting for something." I looked at that opening like a portal. Fear tightened my chest, but a curious sense of familiarity pulled me closer. For a moment I swore I heard clear words, spoken in an ancient language that my brain couldn't decipher. but that seemed to carry an urgency that was impossible to ignore. When I left, I knew something had changed forever. It wasn't just science anymore. Something invisible called to me beyond the data, and I was about to discover how deep that connection ran. The minutes that followed were a blur of chaos and absolute silence at the same time. I was standing next to the drill when the ground vibrated beneath my feet as if the very core of the earth had decided to awaken. The machines let out a piercing scream before falling silent, plunging the field into piercing darkness, interrupted only by the beam of my flashlight. "Back off," I screamed, but the sound seemed distant, as if it were coming from under the water. Then, without warning, the ice gave way beneath my boot. A shrill creak, then a bottomless void. The next moment was strange. I felt my body fall, but there was no pain. Just a cold so absolute it made my bones shake, even though I couldn't feel my bones anymore. I saw the helmet slip off my head and slowly spin in the air before disappearing into the crevasse like a fragment of myself. As I fell, my vision expanded. I was able to look down and see what was left of the drilling rig, little points of frantic light racing toward the edge. They didn't see me. I was separated from them, suspended between the white sky and the black abyss. Silence became a living presence. There was no fear. There was just a curious sense of detachment, as if I were observing everything through a thick lens of frozen water. My heart, or what I imagined to be my heart, wasn't beating. Time did not exist. And then I realized something strange. Even though I was floating in the void, a part of me was aware of my limp body below, my chest rising and falling. Erratically, my eyes closed, my breathing shallow. It was like watching a hologram, a reflection without substance. Then I felt a tug, subtle but undeniable, that dragged me upward. My consciousness was sucked away from that cold, lifeless spot, drawn to something I couldn't yet understand. As I climbed, the edges of the crevasse seemed to curve as if they wanted to swallow me again. Before emerging into the diffuse light of the camp, I had one last glimpse, a luminous shape hovering above the void, motionless and serene, watching. My shattered body. I didn't know who or what I was, but at that moment I understood that I was not alone, even there on the edge between life and death. The pull that was dragging me upward intensified, filling my being with a white pulsating light that burned painlessly, as if purifying every particle of my existence. Suddenly the abyss dissipated. There was no more crevasse, no ice, no camp. I was being thrown through a tunnel of light, its walls vibrating with energy and unspeakable whispers. The sound was both music and language, echoing inside my mind, without needing a voice. There was no sensation of speed. There was simply an inexorable movement toward the center of that infinite clarity. Thoughts, memories of Rachel, scientific formulas, old regrets floated around me and dissolved like smoke upon contact with the light. Then, at the culmination of that silent journey, a presence materialized before me. He was not human, and yet he exuded a humanity so profound that my heart, if it had still been able to beat, would have burst with recognition. It was Jesus. His eyes were as vast as galaxies, flooding me with an authority that demanded no obedience, only recognition. Darian Crow, his voice sounded directly inside me. Without sound vibrations, you were chosen to see beyond the veil of reality. I tried to speak, but no sound emerged. My words were unnecessary. He knew every corner of my soul, every doubt buried beneath years of skepticism. Instead of questions, I felt an immense love impossible to describe, that at the same time burned and soothed all my internal wounds. You look for answers in science, he continued, but there is knowledge that transcends matter. Beneath the ice of Antarctica lie seals created before time, seals that contain a force not made for this world. As he spoke, images appeared in my mind, circles of light rotating beneath layers of ice, ancient structures that pulsed with living, energy, and something dark, a hungry darkness trying to break through invisible barriers. When these seals are broken, he warned, deception will come disguised as salvation. Many will accept the promise of easy connection but miss its essence. You will return to warn humanity. The surrounding light began to recede, and the presence became a slowly receding point of peace. Before everything disappeared, his last word resonated with me like a seed planted deep in my being. Go, make them listen. In an instant, I was thrown back into my body, breathing as if each breath was a miracle. The camp lights flickered in the distance, but inside me there was something that would never be turned off. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.